On July 4th, 2026, America celebrates 250 years of independence. Fireworks will light the sky, flags will wave, and nearly everything you think you know about that founding moment will be wrong. I'm your host, and this is History That Hits. Today we're pulling back the curtain on America's birthday, the messy, human, surprisingly chaotic truth behind the Declaration of Independence. Here's what the textbooks don't tell you. On the very day Congress adopted the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson went shopping. He bought 7 pairs of women's gloves and a thermometer. The famous signing? It didn't happen on July 4th. That iconic painting hanging in the Capitol Rotunda? It depicts an event that never occurred. And for nearly 2 decades after 1776, Americans largely forgot about the Declaration altogether. They celebrated their state constitutions instead. Let's go back to the summer of 1776. The Continental Congress has been meeting in Philadelphia for months, debating whether the American colonies should break from Britain entirely. On June 7th, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia stands before his fellow delegates. He introduces a resolution that will change everything. A formal declaration that these colonies ought to be free and independent states. The Congress isn't ready to vote. They need time. So on June 11th, they appoint a committee of 5 men to draft a formal declaration. Jefferson, Adams, Franklin, Sherman, and Livingston. Thomas Jefferson, just 33 years old, takes on the task of writing the first draft. He works in a rented room on Market Street, hunched over a portable writing desk of his own design. Jefferson's draft goes through revisions. Congress cuts about a quarter of his original text, including a passage condemning the slave trade, a cut that would haunt the nation's conscience for centuries. By late June, the draft is ready for debate. On June 28th, the Committee of 5 presents their work to the full Congress. This is the moment John Trumbull would later paint. But here's what Trumbull got wrong. His painting suggests this was the signing. It wasn't. The signing wouldn't happen for another month. The famous painting depicts a scene of presentation, not signatures. On July 2nd, 1776, Congress finally votes. The resolution for independence passes. John Adams is certain this is the date that will live in history. Adams writes to his wife Abigail, predicting July 2nd will be celebrated with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other. Adams was wrong about the date. July 4th became the anniversary because that's when Congress adopted the final text, and that's the date printed on the document itself. And here's where the story gets wonderfully human. On July 4th, the day Congress adopted this world-changing document, Thomas Jefferson did something remarkably ordinary. He went shopping. His personal account book shows purchases that day: 7 pairs of women's gloves, likely gifts, and a thermometer, the birth of a nation, and the author had errands to run. 4 days later, on July 8th, the Declaration received its first public reading in Philadelphia. A crowd gathered in the State House yard as Colonel John Nixon read the words aloud. The Liberty Bell rang out, though it wouldn't be called that for another 70 years. Church bells across the city joined in. This was the moment independence became real to ordinary citizens. The next day, July 9th, General George Washington assembled his troops in New York City. He ordered the Declaration read aloud to every brigade. What happened next became legend. After the reading, a crowd of soldiers and civilians marched to Bowling Green, where a gilded lead statue of King George III sat astride his horse. They pulled it down. But this wasn't mere vandalism. The statue weighed over 4,000 pounds. The crowd had plans for all that lead. They melted it down and cast it into over 42,000 musket balls. 42,000 rounds fired back at the king's own soldiers. History rarely offers such perfect symbolism. Now, about those signatures. The Declaration was adopted on July 4th, but most delegates didn't sign it that day. The formal signing happened almost a month later, on August 2nd. Even then, not everyone signed. It took 6 months to gather all 56 signatures. Some delegates weren't even present on July 4th. They signed whenever they could attend. Those 56 signers were a diverse group, at least by 18th century standards. 8 of them weren't even born in America. They came from England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Signing the Declaration was an act of courage, or perhaps foolishness. Every man who put his name to that document was committing treason against the most powerful empire on earth. Benjamin Franklin reportedly quipped at the signing, "We must all hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately." The stakes couldn't have been higher. Not everyone kept their courage. Richard Stockton of New Jersey became the only signer to recant his support. Captured by the British in November 1776, he was thrown into a brutal prison. Stockton was starved, frozen, and mistreated so severely that he eventually signed a declaration of loyalty to the crown. He was released, broken in health, and died just a few years later. Here's perhaps the most surprising truth about the Declaration of Independence. For nearly 2 decades after 1776, Americans largely forgot about it. The Declaration wasn't read publicly at July 4th celebrations. It wasn't taught in schools. Americans celebrated their individual state constitutions instead. Those were the documents that governed daily life. It was the partisan battles of the 1790s that revived the Declaration. Jeffersonian Republicans claimed it as their founding document, using its language of equality against their Federalist opponents. By the 1820s, as the last surviving signers began to die, nostalgia transformed the Declaration into something sacred. The 50th anniversary in 1826 became a turning point. In a coincidence that seemed almost divine, both Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died on July 4, 1826, exactly 50 years after they had helped create the nation. That dual death elevated the Declaration from political document to national scripture. The founders became mythic figures. July 4th became America's holiest secular day. The original parchment copy of the Declaration has had its own remarkable journey. It survived fires, wars, and well-meaning preservation efforts that actually damaged it. In 1820, Secretary of State John Quincy Adams ordered a facsimile made using a wet transfer process. The copying likely lifted ink from the original, contributing to its faded appearance today. For 35 years, the Declaration hung on a wall, opposite a window in the Patent Office building. Sunlight streamed directly onto it day after day, bleaching the ink and aging the parchment. Today, the Declaration lives in the National Archives, sealed in a titanium and aluminum frame filled with argon gas. It's displayed in dim light, protected from the very visibility that once nearly destroyed it. Not all copies received such care. In 1989, a man bought a painting at a flea market in Pennsylvania for $4. Behind the canvas, he found something extraordinary. Hidden in the backing was an original Dunlap broadside, one of the first printed copies of the Declaration, produced overnight on July 4, 1776. Only 26 are known to exist. That $4 purchase sold at auction for $8.14 million. Somewhere behind dusty paintings in attics across America, history may still be waiting to be found. As we approach the 250th anniversary, the Declaration continues to evolve in meaning. Its words have been claimed by abolitionists, suffragists, civil rights leaders, and activists of every cause. The line, "All men are created equal," words written by a man who owned over 600 enslaved people during his lifetime, remains both America's promise and its challenge. If you want to understand the Declaration more deeply, start by actually reading it. Most Americans have only heard excerpts. The full text takes about 5 minutes to read aloud. The original lives at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. Free admission, open daily. Stand before it and you're seeing the actual parchment the founders touched. The America 250 Commission has events planned nationwide throughout 2026. Search America 250 to find celebrations, educational programs, and historical sites near you. Consider researching your own family history through this lens. Where were your ancestors in 1776? Were they among those included in "all men are created equal," or excluded from that promise? If stories like this interest you, hit subscribe. We cover the hidden truths behind a history you thought you knew. Every week, a new episode. The Declaration's power lies not in what it achieved in 1776, but in what it made possible. It set a standard that America has spent 250 years trying to live up to. So when the fireworks light up the sky on July 4, 2026, remember, the story is messier than the myth. Jefferson went shopping. The signing took months. Americans forgot the document existed. But perhaps that messiness is what makes the Declaration so enduringly human. It wasn't created by marble statues. It was drafted, debated, and signed by flawed people making extraordinary choices in uncertain times. That's the real story of Independence Day, Not a perfect founding, but a beginning. An idea set down on parchment that continues to challenge and inspire 250 years later. I'm your host, and this has been History That Hits. Until next time, remember, history isn't what happened. It's the stories we choose to tell about it.